This is a lesson on author's purpose in poetry by Mrs. Board. There are 4 purposes for writing poetry. These purposes also mirror in any type of writing. The purposes are to persuade, inform, entertain, and share. Often, authors write proposals or essays to persuade, articles, biographies, or fact sheets to inform, stories, fairy tales, or fiction to entertain, and narratives, poetry, personal letters, emails, or text messages to share. A good way to remember the 4 purposes for an author is to remember the acronym PIES, P-I-E-S, Persuade, Inform, Entertain, and Share. First, we'll talk about poetry that persuades. In this poem called Voting by Bernard Howe, you will see that it is a poem that talks about the reasons why we should vote and also some just general facts about voting. So this poem was written to persuade, and the author is trying to get you to go out and vote. To cite evidence directly from the poem, go cast your vote with pride. It's in the final stanza, in the second line of the final stanza. You'll see that that's the line that is specifically written to persuade. Another reason for writing this poem was to inform the reader, telling you about voting. Voting is our given right. That's the first line of the poem. Poetry that informs. If you read this poem called I Regret to Inform You by Robert L. Hinshaw, who is retired from the Air Force, you will see that it is a poem about his mother finding out that he is missing in action. He later talks about how he loses his mother, and he finds the letter that was written to her to tell her about being missing in action. So the purpose of this poem is to inform. The evidence from the text that supports that is, I regret to inform you the dreaded telegram began. That's the first line. This poem also has a dual purpose of sharing the memories of his mother and the war. If you look at the line that reads, going through her things, he discovered the telegrams wrinkled with age. Tears welled in his eyes as he saw tear stains on each yellowed page. Those are the last 2 lines of the poem, and it shares a very deep emotion that the author felt as he read the letter. Poetry often entertains as well. Shel Silverstein is one of the funniest poets I know. He wrote the poem called Messy Room. You've probably read it before. But in this poem, the author is looking at a messy room. He later finds out that the room that he is looking at is in fact his. So he's telling a pretty funny story, and his purpose is to entertain you. Huh? You say it's mine? Oh dear, I knew it looked familiar. That's really kind of the punchline of this joke, so to speak, or this poem. The author is also sharing something about his life, and you'll see the line, his workbook is wedged in the window, his sweater's been thrown on the floor. So he's just sharing what he sees. Poetry that shares. This is the final purpose for poetry. This poem is called Papa's Fishing Hole, and it's by Elizabeth Babin. It just tells of a young boy or girl who goes fishing with their grandpa. The author is merely sharing a story of the memories. The poem was to entertain. The main purpose, though, was to share. Sharing a story about spending time with his grandpa. The line from the text, my papa handles him with the skill of a master as I stop helping to watch him work, just kind of reveals some things that the author wants you to know about this poem. The entertaining part is the dual purpose. Not that it's funny, but the story is very moving, and entertainment doesn't always have to be funny. The part where he shares some really vivid details, I hand him a wriggling nightcrawler fighting for his life, the deadly hook squishes through the worm's head, and I watch the brown guts ooze out. Very vivid details, even though it's a little gross, but you can probably relate to that, and the author is trying to get you to relate to her poem, that is. Thank you for watching my tutorial on author's purpose in writing poetry.